Hi, I'm FIDE Master Levi Cherbolenko, and in this series I explore the typical mistakes of people rated anywhere between 8,000 and 2,000. This is a first reaction, no engine analysis of a chess.com game played between 1599 versus 1626. Let's start. Alright, d4, d5, e3. Okay, that's already inaccuracy. Is blocking the bishop. Is counterintuitive. You have to first develop the bishop, put the bishop outside the chain, then close the chain with e3 and then develop this bishop. Not e3, it's too passive, right? So normally we play like bishop f4, e3, or knight f3, developing the knight, you know, or we play c4, gambit, you know, putting pressure against the center, and then if black defends it, then we put even more pressure, develop the knight, you know, and if black takes, white can just play e3 or e4, we're gonna win the pawn back, whereas black will lose his central key pawn, which your pawn on d5 defends the central key e4 square, you know. So something like this, normal development, not e3. This is not development, this is just the pawn play, true passive, blocking the bishop. So already this is inaccurate. Okay, bishop f5. It's okay, but it's not the best. There's this rule of thumb: you first develop the knights, then the bishops. Like, you're gonna move the knight on f6 for sure 100% anyway, whereas the bishop is flexible. Depending how white plays, you could move it through f5, or you could move it through g4, maybe like we go knight f3, I don't know, you wanna pin the knight, or maybe in some circumstances it makes sense to feint to it, right? It depends. The knight you're gonna put for sure on f6, whereas the bishop is flexible. So don't start with the bishop, start with the knight. Plus it's a kingside piece. You wanna castle quickly, so much more important is to develop kingside pieces first, and then worry about your bishop. So it's a knight f6 is more precise. Knight f6. Okay, let's see. White played let's see, knight f3. Okay, knight f6, bishop through e2. Okay, I mean this is too passive. What is this? It's true. I think white should play like c4. White should play c4 in these kind of positions. Put pressure on against the center. Right? Put pressure against the center. And then let's say black plays c6, white could play knight c3, putting pressure again on the center. The rule of thumb, we put the knight behind the pawn, the c knight behind the c pawn, you know? Because otherwise, if you just play knight c3, there's no real pressure. It's pawn c6, no real pressure. So c4, c6, let's say, knight through c3. Let's say black plays e6, now queen b3, putting pressure against the b7 pawn. Very uncomfortable pressure. You know, so that's another plus of c4. You open up the queen, and now it's not so clear for black how do they defend, because if they play b6, well, that's not good. It's not a good idea to play b6 when your bishop is on f5. It's cut, right? Like this diagonal is cut. It's like the chain is closed, because when you weaken the light squares on the queen side, the bishop should be on b7 to cover up these light squares. This is a fianchetto pawn structure. When you have a fianchetto pawn structure, you must have a fianchetto bishop. Otherwise, let's say white goes cd, cd, for example, and now there's a whole, you know, bunch of weak light squares, and white could play like bishop b5, annoying check, or if this knight ever moves from b8, white could play bishop a6, and then from a6 guard c8, you know, and then white could play rook c1, pressure the c file, and black could not do the same because of a bishop on a6, you know. So there has to be a bishop that would guard these weak light squares, and there is not. So b6 is not good. Queen c8 also not ideal. Well, 9 points guard, queen is like 9 points roughly. Guarding 1 point, that's already not good. 9 points guarding 1 point, right? True, white could play bishop d2, rook c1, and then like cd at some point, and there's like this pressure against the queen, so it's not ideal to have a queen against the rook. So what remains? I mean, queen b6 also maybe not ideal. White could play, let's say, c5, typical idea. When there's this kind of pressure, usually it's good to like play c5, and then if queen b3, ab, don't look at double pawns. It's not a weakness. Much more important that we have an a file. Double pawns are not always a bad idea. Another point is that white next can play b4, b5 and undouble. There's another rule of thumb: when you have double pawns, always advance the double pawn. Always advance the double pawn. And now the problem is black cannot stop b5. So for example, let's say black goes knight bd7, b4. The threat is to play b5, and black cannot really play e6. I mean, it doesn't help, because white can play b5 nonetheless, because this rook is loose, right? So cb, white could just take knight takes b5. Now ab does not work because of rook takes a. Now it has a bunch of threats here, knight c7, winning the rook. And even if black, let's say, plays rook to c8, white could at the very least just go back, and then the next plan for white would be to push again before b5. Maybe first bishop e2, let's say maybe castle, but then before b5. Black would have to take, white would take back, let's say, I don't know, with a bishop, for example, right? And then this is a very poor structure for black. Why? Because white has this very sturdy pawn chain, e3, d4, c5, against a very poor, backward, weak, isolated b7 pawn, which black will lose. It is too slow. White will like, I don't know, put a rook on the b file or something, or attack it somehow. This pawn will get lost. It's a very weak pawn. And then white will have basically a guarded passer. Okay, so this is usually the best plan for white. Push b5 once, push b5 the second time. You know, so yeah, it's very poor structure for black. So this is what white should have done. That's how they always play, playing actively in the center. c4, knight c3, queen b3. You know, something like this. But not bishop e2 is too slow. It is just too slow. c5. Okay, that's a very good move. Very good move. That's another rule of thumb. If white does not play c4, we play c5. We play c5 in the center. Okay, we even can do the same to white. Knight c6, pawn e6, and then maybe we could play queen b6. And then, you know, if white goes c3, queen b3, we could play pawn to c4. Queen takes b6, ab. And then it's the same situation, but for us, for black. So that's a very, very good idea. If white does not play c4, if they play slowly, if they don't play explosively in the center, don't play with pawns in the center, we should play explosively in the center. We should take the initiative. So c5, a very good move. Okay, a3, what a waste of time. It's too slow. It's a corner pawn move. In the opening, we don't waste time on corner pawn moves. Number one thing in the opening is king safety. If your king is unsafe, nothing else matters. King safety. So I'd say number one move, just castle. Then worry about the other stuff. Now your king is safe, think about the other stuff later, you know. But king safety first. So, you know, also, you know, piece development, central play. Piece development in the center or pawn play in the center. So either castle, king safety, or play pawn to c3 maybe, let's say, strengthen your center. It's a pawn move, but it's a central pawn move. It strengthens the center. Or pawn to c4, again, central pawn move. Now, only downside of this is, after we take, let's say, white takes in two tempi. We move bishop e2, bishop c4. That's why much more sense it would have made for white to play c4 immediately. And when if we take in one tempo. Whereas here, they take in two tempi, so it's not ideal. But it's still better than a3 or c3, like I said. But it has to be some central move, pawn or piece play in the center, or castle, king safety. Okay, so a3, way too slow, very slow. Okay, e6. All right, here, knight to c6, okay. c3, yeah, no, I don't like this. Now this is passive. Yes, I said c3, but c3 here, without a3 makes more sense. It's just one central move, fortifies the center. Whereas if you play here c3, already not the same. Why? Because you played a3, now you weaken too much the light squares. You have now all the pawns on the dark square, which is not good. Like, it's one thing to have this, and it's another thing to have this, because you weaken too much the light squares. When you put all pawns on one color, you automatically weaken the opposite color, you know. So it's too slow. It's too slow. I mean, should have played something else. Maybe probably c4. About knight c3, yeah. This probably would have been the best. Central play. Much more active. c3, way too passive. Burying this bishop. Now, you know, this bishop is completely stuck. So very bad idea. Knight e4. I don't like this move. This move violates opening principles. You move the same piece twice instead of developing the other bishop. In the opening, we go wide, then we go deep. Wide meaning first we develop each piece once, then after we've developed each piece once, you can go deeper with some other pieces. You can move them more than once. You know, I think like what was black idea, like to centralize the knight, maybe like attack the king, starting some attack on the king side. That's a common mistake. You think you can just attack with one or two pieces, but it's too premature. Your attack will not work with just like one knight or a knight and a queen or something. You should develop more pieces. First develop more pieces, then attack the king. Don't attempt an attack with just one, two pieces while your other pieces are not developed yet. It's premature. That's one thing. Another thing. The downside of this move potentially is that white could play knight bd2 and then simplify. It goes right into knight d2, and then white just takes and it simplifies. This is maybe not a good idea for black. Why? Because we have more space. Like if you look at white, it's just like cramped. This knight has no moves, this bishop has no moves, so white's cramped. When you have more space and your opponent has less space, his pieces are bumping into each other. He has too many pieces, too few squares. So they become their own enemies. So when you play knight e4, you help white play knight d2 with an exchange. And when you help him get rid of his pieces, and thus the less pieces he has, the more room he has for the remaining pieces. They don't bump into each other. Do you see? So we want to avoid exchanging pieces. Ideally, we want to play knight e4, well, like there's no exchange. Or if there is an exchange, there should be a concrete reason for that exchange. Maybe eventually, maybe it will be some concrete reason. Here, the exchange doesn't give us anything, So that's my point. Like, you just go right into knight d2 with an exchange. So what I would do, I would at least first develop the bishop. Prepare the castle, develop the bishop, put this bishop on this great diagonal, and maybe then knight e4 after bishop d6 or after first a castle, right? But at least bishop d6. Then you could go knight e4 after castle or immediately, and then I would play queen f6 and queen h6. It looks like a weird square in the corner, but this is a very good square for the queen, a typical square for the queen, because you attack h2. You don't play queen c7, because that's not so dangerous to attack with a bishop. You want to play queen h6 to attack the pawn with a queen. And then you go g5, g4, attacking the guardian, which is the f3 knight. And that's how I would do it. Right, knight e4, queen f6, queen h6, g5, g4. That's the best way, And also, there's also another plan. If you don't want to attack on the king side, another plan is to simply castle and then go for e5. That's another thing. Remember, in this kind of pawn structure, when you have like e3, d4, c3 versus c5, d5, another very good plan for black, one of the best plans, is to make a pawn break, is to play e5. So you could put a rook on e8, maybe put your queen on e7, and maybe bring the a rook to d8, let's say, and then push e5 with initiative. So remember, there is two plans in this kind of positions. Attack on the king side. If you attack on the king side, you don't want to play e5. You can combine sometimes, but ideally you want to keep the game closed. Or you can play more sided in the center with an e5 pawn break. These are the two best plans for black. So this is what I would do. Okay, knight e4, b4. Yeah, that's a bad idea. It weakens even more the light squares, and because now this as long as the pawn is on b2, they could potentially play b3, cover up c4, but now c4 is forever weak. 1, 2, the c3 pawn becomes backward. This bishop again is just buried here, like I said, the pawn on c3 is weak. Also, this gives the opportunity for black to play c4 and close the game down. We just said that black wants to attack on the king side, correct? With this kind of stuff. Well, when you attack on the side, the best counterplay is central counterplay. Central counterplay. But now we just help us close the game down, correct? So now it's very difficult for white to generate any counterplay. Much more sense, if we're gonna attack them on the king side, much more sense it makes for white to play c4 to create central chaos. Then, if the game opens up, our chances of kingside attack are not as high, because the game is open. Usually, what's going on around the center is faster than side play, and so might not work our attack. Might not work. This would have made way more sense. Way more sense. So b4 is a huge strategical mistake. Black would play c4, and then just kill white on the king side. Yeah, but okay, cd. Wait, CD? Yeah, no, CD, okay, it's fine, but it's not the best. I think white should have played c4 and then bishop d6, yeah. CD, we just open the game a little bit up, so not as ideal. But still, black has very good position, yeah. Okay, CD, bishop d6, finally. Bishop b2, okay. Castles. Okay, it's fine, but I think it's not the most precise. Two things here. We just said that we want to attack white on the this great diagonal. Now, what can white do? Well, white usually blocks this diagonal by playing knight e5. So the problem with this is that they could play like potentially now or later or now, even now, knight e5 and block this bishop. So therefore, if I were black, I'd probably go queen f6 for two reasons. One, to control this key square. We have to control this key e5 square. If we're gonna checkmate white, we should not allow knight to e5, blocking our bishop. There's also a second reason, a bit deeper. The second reason is this. Let's say white goes knight bd2. Then you play queen h6 just in time. What do I mean? You want to play queen h6 just in time, not to allow white to play knight e4. What do I mean? Because if white plays knight e4, we go d, attack the knight. Now if the knight just moves here, just checkmate. If we play knight e5, we just go pawn f6. Knight takes e6, checkmate. And so you do not allow white to take on e4. Your queen just in time came to h6. Whereas, if you cancel, let's say white goes knight b2, and you now play queen f6. Now white is in time to play knight e4. Because after d, we can play knight d2, and there's no checkmate. So they are in time. It's still good for black. Black will play queen h6 and provoke, I mean, h3 maybe too risky, maybe some sacrifice, you know. Maybe risky, provoke g3, g3 is weakening the light squares. This pawn is pretty good on e4. Maybe we move a queen somewhere back and potentially prepare h4, h5 or something, I don't know. Maybe this knight we maneuver. But the point is, white could take on e4. He's not losing. Whereas if you play queen f6, you keep the tension. You do not allow them to take. So you keep the tension when you go g5, g4, see? So this is the key. Do not allow knight e5, and also do not allow or make it more difficult for white to play knight takes e4, you know? Yeah. So I'd say this is better than castles, yeah. But okay, this here, okay. Yeah, he goes on wrong. I mean, this I can also see pressures the bishop, potentially maybe a5. It does make some sense. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. Connects the rooks, maybe put a rook on c8. But much more dangerous, I think, would be to attack on the king side. So I'd still play here probably. Take, so yeah, I'd still take here, and still, like I said, some pressure. Yeah. But of course, ideally, much better would have been not to allow knight e4. Yeah, to keep the tension. Okay, here, knight b3, okay. Rook f2 c8. Yeah, that's fine, but I think why not a5? a5 typical. Whenever there's a pawn chain like this, we always make pawn breaks through pawn chains. You know, and now if they take, I mean, you just takes, and now at the very least you could just take the knight like this, or take the bishop. Now this knight's hanging, this pawn's guarded, this pawn is potentially weak. There's also this knight c3 threat, attacking the queen, attacking the bishop. So, looks pretty good. And if b5, at the very least we could just move a knight somewhere, and then like play like rook c8, and we're fine. There's also, by the way, this idea, knight e7, knight c8, move the queen, and then knight b6. Typical idea, remember, when you have this kind of structure, typical idea to have a knight on b6, because then it can go through, it blocks the pawn, and it can go through the light squares like a4 and c4, so it's very good. Yeah. Or maybe we could play a4. Takes, and now this pawn is pretty dangerous, right? Potential passer, maybe rook c8, rook c2, attacking with bishops. This knight can go maybe through c3, this a3 pawn potentially weak. Looks pretty good for black, yeah. So I think a5 would have made a lot of sense. But okay, here, knight c5. Okay. Yeah, this is weird. What's this? See, but at this point it's clear black is drifting around. We don't know what we're doing. We have no direction. They play queen b6, then we go queen c7. This is guarded. I mean, it's too slow. By the way, wait, don't we have takes? Don't we have this tactic? Takes. There's no rook b1 because of a bishop. And we just won the pawn. And this pawn is weak. We could then also attack it. Actually, black is just up a pawn. Yeah. Actually, knight c5 is a mistake. White played. Yeah, just take. Yeah, this is what black should have done with a good advantage. Yeah, queen c7 mistake. Okay, rook c1. Okay, queen e7 already makes sense, of course, take it out of rook's c1 rook's pressure. Okay, queen a4. Okay, white actually found not a bad move. Activating the queen, connecting the rooks, pressuring this knight, you know. a6, okay, that's a bad idea. We do not play a6 in these kind of positions. Why? Because you indirectly or directly weaken the dark squares. Because one, you weaken b6, right? Because there's no more pawn on a7. And because you weaken b6, you indirectly weaken c5. Also, because you now have a pawn on a6, it's gonna be more difficult to push b6, because you're gonna lose the pawn on a6. And if you cannot push b6, this is a forever knight here, you know? Or if you're gonna take, well, it's gonna like take this way or this way and have a strong pawn on c5. So it's not ideal. We don't wanna take on c5, that's for sure. We wanna play b6, you know? But also not so easy how to play b6. Because like I said, with a bishop on f5, this is gonna be all weak when you play b6, c6, b7, a6 gonna be all weak. So, yeah. See, this is because of all black's slow play. Now we're in some trouble here, you know. But yeah, a6 is definitely not good. Plus, white also has this knight a6 move, no? ba, rook takes c6. There's this tactic. Queen d7, rook c1. Takes, just takes. Takes, takes. Game over. Yeah. So there's even just because of this tactic. So yeah, that's definitely a mistake. Okay. Queen d1. Wow, it's too slow. What is this? It's too slow. Just knight a6 should have played. Or even if you don't see knight a6, don't play queen d1. Play some any other move. It's just too slow. Yeah. Too slow. Okay. b6. b6. Just losing the pawn. Okay. Play just lose the pawn. Knight g5. Takes. Okay, takes. Okay. Pawn f4, queen g6, b5, bishop e4. Okay, that's a good move. Attacking the pawn, threatening checkmate. All right. Rook f2, knight e7. Okay, not bad. The point is to go knight f5, put pressure on this weak pawn. Maybe knight h4, put further pressure on g2. Okay, it actually makes sense. Another move would be knight a5. And then controlling the light squares, you know, like knight c4, or if the queen moves, you have like knight b3, also would have made a lot of sense. But okay, knight e7 is fine. Okay, rook takes c8, rook takes c8, queen a1. What is this? Putting the queen on the worst possible square is like stuck behind the pawn, stuck behind the pawn, stuck behind the bishop. Doesn't make any sense. Like, white's position is so, it lacks so much harmony. I mean, it's so scattered all over the place. This rook is weird, guarding one pawn is bad, it's just completely blocked. This bishop is stupid on b2, black behind all the possible pawns. The queen is on the worst possible square. The knight, what is this knight doing here? Completely out of the game, completely out of touch. It's so crazy. And look at black. Great centralized bishop on e4, pressuring g2. Great queen pressuring the pawn. Next knight f5, pressuring the e3 pawn. Coming to h4, we have a c file. Maybe rook c2 next. It's so harmonious. So it's not just about the material. It's also about your king safety, files, you know, piece activity, pawn structure. It's about the soul of your pawns and pieces, not just about like the theoretical value, you know, or that like your up or down a pawn. It's about the soul of the activity of your pawns and pieces. So yeah, black has huge compensation here. Yeah, very, like, this is one of the biggest reasons why people lose. Because you lose when you lack harmony. When your pieces are, like, you'll notice, if you look at your games, you'll notice most of the games that you lose is because of this disharmony, is like lack of harmony. It's like your pieces are scattered all over the place. A rook on f2, a queen on a1, a knight on f6. Knight on a6. There's like no connection all over the place. That's one of the biggest reasons. Always try to like keep them all together. It has to make sense. It has to be in harmony. Okay. Okay, knight f5, attacking the weak pawn. Yeah, this is of course pretty bad for white. Yeah, bishop c1. I mean, we have to play so passively. But I mean, what else? Okay, rook c2, activating the rook, putting pressure here. Very great. Okay. Pawn a4. White tries his last chance. His last ditch effort. Maybe to create some password, maybe. I mean, yeah. What else can he do? So it makes sense. But I think it's too slow. I think it's too slow. Yeah. Knight h4. Okay, attacking the pawn. Makes sense. Okay. g3. Alright. h5. Wait. Timeout. So what? White lost some time probably, yeah? Yeah, probably lost some time, I guess. Yeah, most likely. Yeah, so knight h5, I mean, the point is to play knight f5, I guess. And then pawn h4, right? So with a very strong attack. Yeah, there is not much white can do about it. So yeah, this is pretty good for black. Yeah. What else? I mean, or black could have just played like knight f5 even, and then with idea like knight takes g3, hg, queen takes g3, sacrificing the knight, and also should be some checkmate there. Should be very good compensation for black. So that'd be also pretty good. What else? Maybe even rook e2, by the way. Rook e2, knight f3, check. And now if king h1, we have like knight d4, and if king g2 is like the same. If we go king f2, we have like knight takes here, and then we have a bunch of threats, like knight g4 check. We also have queen g4, queen f3 check and stuff. So many threats. And if king f1, we have bishop d3, pinning the rook, then knight takes h2. Right, it's just completely winning for black basically. Yeah, especially in a practical game, is very difficult to play as white. So yeah, very interesting game. All right, I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.